I think that the challenges of working in that on the flip side is that you can be beholden to waiting for a client to tell you what you're supposed to do next. There are certainly challenges within that. That can be difficult. I think you can't be as nimble as you'd like. And so one of the things that I like that we've been able to do at Priority Bicycles is knowing that is just try and be as nimble as possible and constantly be asking, why are we doing this at this phase? How do we do it the best we can and execute against that dynamically?
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
If you're listening in right now to How I Made It in Marketing, I realize you may not be a marketer per se. You may be an entrepreneur, not native to our industry, so to speak, but you still need to know it well enough to get customers so you can run your business and do whatever it is that you really are passionate about. Well, take heart in a lesson from my next guest. Everything is learnable, he says, even marketing, even photo shoots. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Connor Swegle, the CMO and co-founder of Priority Bicycles. Thanks for joining me, Connor.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this.
This is going to be fun. All right, let me tell the audience who you're about to hear from first. Some quick background about Connor. He's been in our industry. He was an executive producer at Click3X Entertainment and executive producer at Troika. For the past 11 years, he's been at Priority Bicycles, which he helped co-found. Priority Bicycles started by raising $565,000 on KickStarter 11 years ago and now has 35 models and fields 25,000 orders a year. Swegle manages 4 brands, including e-comm, omnichannel, advertising, and events with a core nimble team of 6. So Connor, sounds like a lot's on your plate. Give us a sense. What is your day like as CMO?
Yeah, a lot is on the plate. I think every day, I'd love to say that there is some consistency to every day, but in terms of functionality, there really isn't. The biggest point of consistency is I do get the opportunity to ride my bike into work and I get to ride my bike home every day, which is a huge lucky aspect of what we get to do. But in terms of like what we have going on every day, it's a bit of a moving target. I mean, between those different disciplines, we're rotating our team between, this week might be a product launch and next week might be a event that we're getting set up for. But I will say that every day starts with trying to set the tone for what has to happen for the day. And I think the chaos that lives, whether you're a manager, whether you're an entrepreneur, the chaos that lives in all of our heads at that point, what we try and do is remove that at the start of the day for the team and really set expectations for the team for the day on what they can achieve. And so that they can leave with a sense of completion and clarity, even if I don't always feel that way.
I like that. Remove the chaos. That's a good leader. But also, okay, you're saying ride a bike in. I just kind of question, guys I've known who've worked at car dealerships. It's like, today I'm taking the Porsche Cayman. Today I'm taking this. Like, is it a different bike for, it's like, today feels like this model. Today feels like that model. Or do you have your bike? It's like, this is the commuter. This is what's going in every day.
Yeah, so I'm fairly consistent. Part of my ride is dropping my daughter off at school. So she's 9. So I'm lucky that one of the brands that we run is Extra Cycle, and they have family cargo bikes. So I am able to start the day with my daughter on the back of the bike. We get about 10 minutes together where we get some laughs in, and I can drop her off at school and then jet another 15 minutes into the office here. So I'm fairly consistent with my daily ride.
That's sweet. I like that. All right. Well, let's take a look at some of the lessons from some of the things you've made in your career. I like to say we as marketers and as entrepreneurs too, we get to make things. Like I've never been anything else. I've never been a podiatrist or an actuary, but I don't feel like they leave at the end of the day. Like say, at the end of the day when you leave with the chaos, you also leave, hey, I made something. I made that brand, right? I made that campaign. So your first lesson was everything is learnable, which I mentioned in the open. How'd you learn this lesson?
Yeah, so I think we learned the lesson, as most entrepreneurs do, but I think anybody who's creative minded is you sort of learn through the stumbling blocks along the way. So when we first launched as a company, we were very bootstrapped, and I went from working at big branding agencies where we had clients like ESPN and NBC Sports and big budgets to play with, and then we come here and we launch Priority Bicycles. And again, this is for entrepreneurs, but it's also for people within a marketing department who are trying to figure out how to get initiatives off the ground in a changing media landscape. But I remember our first time we launched a bike, we paid an out-of-house company $2,500 to give us 10 images for our bikes. And it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, when you know how much, everybody knows how much commercial shoots cost. This person was doing us a favor. And I remember getting the images back and finding them to be fairly average. And I looked at the time and I remember a Sony a6000. I mean, we're far beyond that functionality or that, gear now. But I remember that the cost of a lens and a body was the same cost as we were paying for these 10 images, which we had no control over. And I think at that point, I was like, you know what? Like, next time we do this, I'm buying the camera, I'm going to go on YouTube. And I remember just spending hours, probably 100 hours on YouTube, really figuring out how to manipulate this piece of machinery that we had bought and turn it into an investment. And pretty much from there on, I became the head of content for what we were doing. And so what I learned through that process is everything is learnable. And I think when you have stumbling blocks, like 90% of what we do every day as marketers, we can figure out how to do it. And I think we have to know that with as quickly as media is changing and technology is changing, I think we have to be open to that idea that we can figure it out if we just want to get in there and get our hands dirty. So over time, I mean, we saved a huge amount of money, but we also just have a lot more control over the stories we tell, the content that we create, what we want to put out there. We can try stuff and we can fail at it. And really all of that came back to this idea of like, everything can be learned. Let's try it. Let's figure it out. If it's working for us, we can amplify it with dollars and time and energy later. But like, let's just not be afraid to get our hands dirty.
I love that. Now, I mean, with the internet, everything is so learnable. Everything's on there. Like you said, you just went on YouTube and learned things. And I think in marketing departments, whether you have a big budget or not, it's always the next thing to learn, AI, whatever it is. But I always like to play devil's advocate a bit. So let's look at the other side of this. And sometimes something that vendors bring to the table is, hey, it's this other opinion on what the customer wants. So I wanted to ask you, how do you remove your personal opinions from your marketing and even product design, right? So for example, when I interviewed Renee Miller, the founder of the Miller Group, one of her lessons was you don't have to like it, you aren't the target, right? And she talked about a campaign she was doing with the Wolf Range Company where the president didn't like it. They were doing this print campaign. It was like with Wolfgang Puck cookbooklets, right? And the president didn't like it and it wasn't for him. And she's like, look, I don't care what you like, honestly. I care what the customer likes. And I think something really interesting from you is sometimes, I know in my career, in our careers, we're not the ideal customer, right? So we've got to do this other thing where it's like, well, we know we're not the ideal customer. We know that's not right. So we do have to do these mental gymnastics. For you specifically and your team, I think it's interesting because I would guess you kind of are the ideal customer. I mean, I saw the videos of you and obviously you founded a bike company. So how do you do that? But because I saw one of your tips from your first 10 years in business. It's great that Connor put out these 10 tips from 10 years in business. One of them was also, it's not about you. It's about helping the customer. So how do you find that balance? Knowing you are in the ideal customer set, so you feel like, well, you know, maybe I have this special in, but also knowing literally you're running a bike company, you're trying to sell bikes, you're not the customer. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I learned, so seeing product through the eyes of the customer is one of the things that's most important to me personally. And in fact, like people internally know that if we're in a meeting and we're reviewing creative or we're reviewing copy or we're reviewing product development, when people start to say, I like this, I like that, I get infuriated. It will show on my face and I will not make an effort to hide it because I don't care what you like and don't like. What I care about is your understanding and the context for the product that we're trying to launch, for the story that we're trying to tell, for the customer with whom we're trying to connect. And I think the biggest person I learned that from is actually my wife. My wife is a merchant. She's a great merchant. She works in retail and she did men's clothing for years as she was coming up. And she would always tell me that one of her best advantages as a merchant was because she couldn't wear the product. So what she had to look at was what sold before, why it sold. She needed to technically understand it. And then she needed to work with design and concept to understand what that meant moving forward. And I think that was the biggest thing I learned. And if she listens to this, she's tired of hearing my voice, so she probably won't. So like, she's never going to know that I told her that I learned this lesson from her. But I did. And I think that's been something I've carried forward. And I know that in the Generac episode you have that the woman, the leader, marketing leader who spoke, talked a lot about empathy. And I think that's something that, you know, when we look at not personalizing product, when we look at how do we understand the concept of the marketing initiative that we are trying, what's the impact and what's the context for creating that impact within a marketing initiative, those are the most important things. And really when it comes around to product, the thing that I remind people internally, and I think this is a scalable lesson for people everywhere, particularly in the product and services world, is we get our products for free. There is always a bicycle here that somebody can take off the wall. And a good example I give is, let's say that there's a family that's making $100,000 and they are upper middle class, and depending on where they live. And at the end of the year, they may have $3,000 to $5,000 that they can spend on something for them that is purely an indulgence. And what we're saying to them is a product that we're rolling out, if it's on the higher price side of what we're doing, even though it's a great value in terms of where we think we sit in the marketplace, this is the money that this family has earned, that it's either go on vacation or maybe, decide to put some money down on the car that they're going to need in a couple years, or buy this bicycle. It is a huge decision for people, and we need to understand that. We need to respect that, and we need to take that as part of our development. So to the simple question of not personalizing things, there's a lot of points where we can be better at what we're doing and more effective by thinking about where the customer is and taking ourselves out of it through every part of the process.
We have two things that you said that really resonate with me. That I love how hard you are on your team, and they're like, I don't like this, I don't like that. I've heard that from art directors so much in my career of like, oh, this is too long, I would never read it. And it's like, yeah, when your fridge breaks, the person whose refrigerator broke, they're going to want to read about fridges. Nobody else is going to, you know what I mean? But the other thing that you said about we get the bikes for free. So the one thing I do with my team, always push, for example, we have events, we got, free events. And sometimes people ask, oh, hey, give me the Zoom info, give me this. And it's like, no. You go to the landing page, you register for the event, and you get it, because I want you to live like the customer. What you said about the bikes reminds me of a very famous story with General Motors. I don't know if you've heard this before, about how General Motors, the quality of the cars, was going down. It was the 70s and 80s, and, Japanese upstarts, Toyota and Honda, beat GM, these great American companies. Why was it? Well, the executives at General Motors, they weren't going to a dealership and buying a car, right? They were getting special spec models off of the assembly lines just for them. And everyone who built it knew it. So they weren't living like the customer. They didn't realize these cars were falling apart. So I love how you're kind of instilled. So I'm sure that's kind of a nice perk for your team, getting the free bikes. You're still instilling that in their mind.
I think it's very important, for people to understand that the bike, for us, it's grabbing a bicycle off the wall, or, at other companies, it's getting a chance to use a prototype that isn't even out there yet. But for other people, it's a decision about where their limited amount of dollars can go. And right now, like more than ever, even in the last 11 years, like it's more important than ever for us to really be thinking about that.
Yeah. And that's also like, when they're riding it, it's a different experience. You experience a product different depending on how you approach it. So when the guy's riding it, he's like, oh, my wife really wanted to go to Cancun, and I told her no for this bike. And I don't know, is it worth it? I don't know. She's still mad at me about that. All right. Here's another great lesson. You said, whatever they said about lemons and lemonade. What did they say about lemons and lemonade, and how did you live that?
Yeah, I guess what they say is if you got lemons, you got to make lemonade. And for us, the understanding of that practically, because that's just something that it's a term that everybody knows, or it's something that somebody said to you when you're pissed off and it just made you more angry because you're like, help me through this situation. But there is practical relevance. And we saw it here at Priority Bicycles in pandemic when everything shut down for us. We weren't sure what we were going to do, and we weren't sure what we were going to do about supply, and we weren't able to get supply. Bike demand was high, and we ended up having a chunk of overstock of fleet bicycles. So these are bicycles that we would customize for hotels and resorts. And hotels and resorts certainly weren't buying at the time because nobody was traveling. So the team got together and said, well, what are we going to do about this? And we decided to make a lemonade coast. So the bike model was called the Coast. And we took the literal lesson of lemons to lemonade and made a bright yellow custom bicycle that we painted in-house, and we sold a limited number around, but we sold everything that we could, but it was still a limited number. But we told the story of how the team came together. We were all working in separate places, so we were able to develop the story together. We were able to share creative, and then we're able to launch this bright, positive yellow beach cruiser, and it sold really well. And it sold not only because the product was needed, but because of the story and the look and how we all worked together and the energy that we put into it. So we literally took lemons of the situation and made the lemonade coast. And I think that it showed that we could work together. It showed that we could do things differently. I think it allows people to find solutions in different places, or even just take the constraints of a moment and put that into the brief. And I think that's something that we've really carried forward, is the constraint is the brief. The lemons are the brief. So you have to include that in the process. If you don't have time, you don't have budget, you don't have the manpower, you don't have the team power to be able to execute something, you take that as a given, you put that into the project and execute knowing it.
Yeah, I think it was Bruce Lee, famous, the obstacle is the way, the obstacle is the path, something like that.
Yep.
So that's great. And I'm glad you kind of got to that point, because where you're ending it with, because, we've heard a lot of stories about the COVID era. We're 5 years past that. Hopefully we never have to use those lessons again in that specific way. But I always ask, how do you use that in your day-to-day? So for example, I did a case study with a company called Creative Co-op. They won an email marketing award from us. And they did this closeout campaign. So basically, sometimes they would have items on closeout. And so they would be able to use all their order data to send personalized emails to customers who previously bought that or a similar product. And it became a real win-win. They had to offload the products. They were able to sell them. The customers were getting a discount. Plus, when they were sending these emails out, often the customers, when they came back, this would really entice them back. They would also buy other stuff at the store. So they all got an 808% ROI. It was our highest, revenue producing email. And I always think that's a great way to turn lemons into lemonade. You've got these closeout products anyway. So for you, Connor, how do you do that? How have you done that in your day-to-day now?
Yeah, I think from a day-to-day perspective, it really is this idea of taking of the constraints of an initiative, is being able to find a way to embrace them and leverage them. So recently, we shot a bunch of material for Extra Cycle, our cargo bicycle brand, and we shot it out west in San Francisco. So our team went from New York to San Francisco, and we shot. And we brought everything back, and we started cutting it to create little brand moments and brand spots. And what we wanted to do is be able to create a multi-video campaign so that we could have good brand repetition when we executed a paid marketing campaign. It wasn't just going to be an anthem spot. We know that we need more volume because people are on their phones too much. So we got to use that to our advantage. But what happened is when we brought the footage back, the quality of what we wanted from, we actually didn't get great audio quality for what we were shooting. And we didn't have a good backbone of story. And so our team was really frustrated not being able to create to the brief. And so we took a step back and we said, well, what do we have? And what we had was a bunch of amazing B-roll. So instead of doing a linear testimonial style ad, we ended up changing the creative. So instead of, hey, we love our bicycles, you get to spend great family time, come and check them out at extracycle.com. What we did is we went more with great audio, where we had building epic, tugging at the heartstrings audio. We put all the emotions together, and then we changed the tagline out to, it all happens back here, because these are long tail bikes where your family sits in the back. So it's photos of kids smiling, getting on and off the bike, families hugging, families playing around, loading stuff on the bike, taking it off, with this build of it all happens back here. And we feel like that came back to what the core of the brand was. We can deliver the brand message. We have all of the assets created that we need. And it was just a matter of saying, you know what, we don't have this aspect of it. We don't have the vocal through line that we want. Take a step back, figure out how to take that as a given, and then rework the creative. And I'm really happy with where we got with the campaign, but we had to be open to reworking what we had in front of us.
Work with what you have. Yeah. I know you've got kind of a production background, and something I learned in college when I took film classes that really blew my mind is you think of kind of a lot of shoots as being very controlling. The French New Wave, Truffaut and some of those guys, this whole idea of like any mistakes they make, that's part of the process, and they got to figure that out and use that to their advantage. I think that's something we can do as marketing too. Especially shoots, they can be nerve-wracking because you got a lot of money on that set. You got 2 days to get what you need, but having that open-mindedness, like you said, like, okay, let's turn lemons into lemonade. We got what we got. Now what can we do with it? All right. Your worst friend is still better than your best marketing. I love this. So how did you learn this lesson? Your worst friend is still better than your best marketing.
Yeah. So this is an interesting story about referrals and the world we're in about how people choose products. And we have a group thread with a bunch of friends. So there's 10 of us. And we all live in different places. We actually all lived in New York over 10 years ago, and we never see each other in person, but we're constantly talking sports and different things, vacations and all that on this group thread. Well, at one point, somebody on the thread took a picture of a hot sauce and sent it out and said, I really like this. That was it. I really like this. And all of a sudden, 3 of the 10 people, 30% conversion rate, chime in saying, hey, I just bought it. And I looked at it, didn't know what peppers it was made from, didn't know if it was for cooking or for dipping or as a condiment, couldn't pronounce the name of it. And I realized that 30%, now 40%, because one person already had it, of this thread had bought it. And it just reminded me that in today's age, we can do everything that we want to do as far as our push marketing. We can tell all the stories that we want, and we can try and refine things down to the sharpest point of messaging. It's not, right now, it is not going to be as good as a friend telling you to just buy something. And I'll say this, that in the product world, or in the transaction world in general, when you have somebody say, hey, you should get this, as opposed to the brand saying it, your resistance to price doesn't exist. The velocity to purchase is a lot faster. And then the desire to then include yourself in that process. I want to tell a friend because someone told me, somebody put me onto this product. I want to do the same thing. The multiplier effect to that right now is so high. And so a lot of the marketing that we're thinking about doing right now really is about giving people the tools to for discovery and to share their experience with other people.
Well, what do you do in the post-purchase customer experience to get that word of mouth and direct feedback from customers? I think a lot of us want that word of mouth, but it's hard to get. And for example, talking about the post-purchase customer experience, I wrote a case study with Baked by Melissa, and I know we're going to be talking about Melissa Ben Ishay in a little later here. I did want to mention that, like you, Melissa did start in our industry. She was an assistant media planner before she launched her brand, so that's interesting. But anyway, I did this case study with Baked by Melissa about how they optimize the post-purchase customer experience, and it increased triggered email revenue 70%. And one of the interesting things for me from doing that case study was it wasn't necessarily that they did anything groundbreaking. It's just that they focused on that post-purchase customer experience. And I think that's something that we just overlook so often because, to your point, you talked about that conversion rate before. We were working so hard to get that conversion rate. All of our money and time and attention is focused there. Yeah. We overlook the post-purchase. But if we want to get that word of mouth, that's where it's at. So is there anything specific you do post-purchase to help juice that word of mouth and get it flowing?
You know, post-purchase, I think with a lot of post-purchase stuff, like our take on post-purchase is do everything that is a best practice. There's really, in the post-purchase world, we think that there's nothing unique about it. I think we give the buyer a lot of credit as to what decision they want to make. I think we also have a product that has a long consideration window. So typically when somebody decides to buy a product from us, if they're happy with it, they generally feel like they are carrying the brand forward. So, but I do think in general, so much of it comes down to what your pricing model is and your customer acquisition costs that you got to work out on a Excel spreadsheet to figure out what your threshold is for how aggressive you want to be within your post-purchase flows. But I will say for us, it's really just about best practices. So, making sure that after a month, we're checking in with people, making sure that we have an automation for somebody to get a discount code moving forward. I will say that as a company, we are not hyper-focused on splitting that list into a million different pieces. I do think that getting hyper segmented with your emails is something that can take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and particularly in the products and services world. I think the biggest groups are people who are prepared to buy and not prepared to buy. And what you should do is just try and get that prepared to buy into the biggest pile when you're looking at mass or broadcast techniques like post-purchase flow or even, broadcast email flow, if that makes sense. I mean, for us, really just thinking more about tools at the point of purchase is probably more important for us. So, statistics show that people spend, 1% of their marketing dollars on point of purchase conversion methods. So we've spent a lot more time thinking about chat, how we use chat, how we personalize chat, and not even use AI, but our in-house team. So we use a platform called Remark for chat because of its personalization. And I think us spending more time and energy there, and we're finding that, we're seeing probably a lift of 10% by spending a marginal amount of more money at the at point of purchase.
Okay, great. So we just talked about some lessons from some of the things that Connor made in marketing. Next, we're going to talk about some of the lessons he learned from some of the people he made them with. But first, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MechLabs AI, the parent company of Marketing Sherpa. You can get conversion-focused training from the lab that helped pioneer the conversion industry in the AI Guild and a community to collaborate with. Grab your free 3-month scholarship to the AI Guild at join.mechlabsai.com. That's join.mechlabsai.com to learn how to put artificial intelligence to work for you and your brand. All right, let's take a look at some of the lessons from some of the people that have been key in your career. First, you mentioned Sam Calagione, the founder of Dogfish Head Brewery, and you said you learned from Sam that you can and should be yourself. How did you learn this from Sam?
Yeah, so Sam has been a great, whether he knows it or not, Sam has been a great mentor. And I think anybody has seen the Dogfish Head brand, whether they're at a bar or probably on a flight or on a train on the East Coast. It's an everywhere brand. And I remember we had met Sam when we were product testing our new beach cruiser, and he paddleboards every day. So we ended up being linked up with him, sending him a bike, and said, hey, we'd love your feedback on this before we launch. And so we had asked him for feedback. He's not getting back to us. And he's like, you know what? Come to Delaware and hang out. I'll give you feedback. And we're like, man, this seems like a lot of effort, but all right, let's go. Well, we went, and he spent the whole day with us. We rode bikes everywhere. We went in and out of his bars. We went to his restaurants. We went to the brewery, and it was amazing. And at one point, Sam walked into one of his restaurants, and somebody came up to him and had the Dogfish Head tattoo on their forearm. And they're like, hey, Sam, I come to your restaurants. I go to the brewery all the time. I knew I'd see you in here at one point. I wanted to show you the Dogfish Head tattoo that I got. And Sam was gracious and amazing. They took a photo together. We walk out, and Sam goes, man, like what happens if I leave this company? Like, what happens to that guy? And it was such a resounding note that he put himself into the brand, and people loved it. People were getting tattoos of the brand on their body, and it was because of him. And it reminded me that when we look at performance metrics, or we think about the performance of our own company, or we think about the performance of our own group, particularly as leaders of teams, we may feel that we need to act a certain way or do a certain thing. You listen to a podcast or read a book that somebody told you to read, and I want to act like that leader. And I think the biggest thing was just reminding to be ourselves, put ourselves into our team. We do need to figure out our strengths and weaknesses, but people want that real relatable aspect of who we are and how we work, warts and all. And I think that sets a great precedent for where we start with how we work with our teams and how we lead our brands.
So what did you learn from the production and agency world about how to run a creative company that you've then taken into your own company, the positives and negatives? Because as you mentioned about you can and should be yourself, I mean, there's a lot of people probably sitting in agencies or production houses right now that's like, if this was my place, if my name was on the door, we'd be doing it this way. You do have a co-founder. So, I mean, you both had to get together, as you mentioned, strengths and weaknesses, and figure out, okay, how are we going to do this thing? It's not entirely up to you. But having sat in that seat that many of our listeners are sitting in now, what did you take? Like, what positives and maybe negatives did you take when you now had a chance? Okay, let's run a shop ourselves. Obviously not an agency, you're building bicycles, but it's a fairly, I'd say, creative powered company. It's not just a manufacturer.
Yeah. And it's tough. I just went through all of the PTSD of working in an agency. So if you're listening and you work in an agency, I feel you. I feel you out there. Agencies are hard. Agencies are difficult because you're getting pulled in two directions. And so anybody who works in an agency or agency environment, and what's interesting is Priority Bicycles, our marketing team really functions like an agency internally. I mean, we get input from product on what we're making, and then we present it back. And then when we work with partners, because we're adept at creating content, we end up working with our partners and figuring out how to fold the brands into a partnership that we're doing, if that's Goreware or if it's Dogfish Head or anything like that. So I will say the thing with from agencies that has been tremendous is process. How do you approach something with some consistency? How do you determine how do you clearly ask for things? So one thing at agencies that when we worked at our best, what I liked is when you went from, let's just call it like writing to concept to design to production. What I liked was creating a system where the next stage of that process, you took the product from the stage before you and then you added onto it. And I think that was very different than somebody just feeling like, oh, I'm going to hand this off and like, I'm done with my part. Here you go. It was the next stage really saying, hey, here's what I need. Here's what I want. Now I get my hands on it. And I really liked in agencies when you had those like groups of excellence that were built where each stage was really sharp. I like that agencies were very clear about what deliverables were and how to approach it. So I came from entertainment branding and I loved it. Sports and entertainment. Loved it. I mean, I'm a sports fan. I loved getting to work in sports. But what was really great was that entertainment and sports are, it is a mature business, right? Like the NFL has been around for over 50 years. And so what's interesting is when you look at a mature business, entertainment finds a way to represent itself or reinvent itself with each season, with each show. So each product is looking for an edge to tell a story. And look, like the medical drama that comes out is shades of the same of Grays or whatever you saw before, but they find a way to reinvent it and find a new angle to it. And I think that that's something that's great. It's still a show. It's still somebody has to sit down and watch it. But they find the angles of reinvention. And I've loved that about specifically working in entertainment marketing. And I think that entertainment and sports are a great place to look for inspiration. I think that the challenges of working in that on the flip side is that you can be beholden to waiting for a client to tell you what you're supposed to do next. There are certainly challenges within that. That can be difficult. I think you can't be as nimble as you'd like. And so one of the things that I like that we've been able to do at Priority Bicycles is knowing that is just try and be as nimble as possible and constantly be asking, why are we doing this at this phase? How do we do it the best we can and execute against that dynamically?
And speaking of sports and entertainment, I mean, another key element of it is it's very personality driven, right? It's you want to see that actor or actress, you want to see that quarterback, running back, whoever it is. Another lesson you mentioned is people want your story. Be brave enough to tell it. You learned that from Melissa Ben Ishay from Baked by Melissa. As I mentioned earlier, she also started in the agency business. So how did you learn that from Melissa? And again, as a small company, a startup, I've seen you in a lot of the videos. So you're not just a CMO behind the scenes, you are part of the story as well. But how did you learn this from Melissa?
Yeah, so Melissa was great. We met her through some friends, through an artist named Jason Naylor. We did a project together years ago where we made a custom bicycle that was inspired by the Baked by Melissa tie-dye, and it was just something that was very unique and fun and positive that just ran with the personality of Jason Naylor as an artist, and then Melissa as a really just as a person, as a personality that leads Baked by Melissa. And so the funny thing with Melissa, and I don't know if I've ever told her this, but I'm sure she's heard it from other people, is that, Melissa in a lot of ways like exploded because she was like making dinner, right? She'd put her phone up and make a salad, and all of a sudden that salad shows up at Sweet Green or wherever it was. And she was just making dinner for her family. I mean, one of the most simple functional acts that we all do every day. And most of us would be horrified if somebody saw us in our moment of making breakfast or dinner, trying to yell at our kids while they're, trying to get their homework done and we're messy making dinner. But like for her, it became a point of that really just provided differentiation. It showed people kind of who she was and how she put care into what she did. And it wasn't necessarily, she didn't have to show that by making the product or just talking about the product or going from a canned script. It was just being herself. And I think it showed people what went into the product. And I think that that's really important. So I think that, if you're a marketer, if you're leading a marketing team, or if you're the head of a product or a group that has a certain way that it does something, I think that it's really important to be yourself, talk about how you did it and why you did it. I think people right now, and this is talked about in a lot of places, people want to know why they're buying what they're buying, or why they're spending time with the things that they're spending their time with, who's behind it, how did they get there? And I think that has to be an essential part of the marketing process, is to show people where the sausage is made or how the sausage is made. And the personality behind that is really important. And I've always said to people, the best people to tell the story are typically ones who aren't even the most comfortable doing it, because they're typically the ones that feel like they need to sharpen the pencil and put their head down and really work on whatever that product is. And I think being able to take that vulnerability and the care that they have and put that into the story is something that is a huge differentiator, and something that you have to do today, and something you have to try to do today to be successful.
And that's been a real evolution of marketing and advertising too, where there was that very polished spokesperson, right? It used to be that, but now it's like, yeah, I want to see the real person behind this, and it might not be the best on camera, but wow, they're real, and let's see what they're actually making. So that's a key part of it. Obviously, founders, telling their story, or the employees. But what about customers, right? You talked about that word of mouth. Have you figured anything out on how to get a good customer story and highlight it? For example, when I interviewed Jenny Asimos, the head of content communications at way.com, on How I Made It Marketing, one of her lessons was authenticity works. And she told about her time at eHarmony, about how they would feature these real life success stories from real people. Very hard to get, took a lot of extra work. They just work so well. So I wonder, I don't know if it's the Melissa Ben Ishay story that was a customer of yours, how you found that story, or just in general, how do you find customer stories? Do you highlight them? And then ultimately, with the past in production, how do you know which stories are going to play well, which are going to be good on camera?
Yeah, for sure. So something that I think is important that really, it lines up with what, what I was mentioning about Melissa, and just how she was just authentically herself, and it was very popular and resonant with people. I think a lot of what our take is that we have to be in the situation with our customers to really identify. So our customers are deciding to take their money, their time, and their energy to ride their bikes, whether that's just at the end of the day to blow off some steam or to commute, or they want to do something that's a full-born 10-day adventure across a state. That's an important process for them. So for us, we are trying to make an effort as much as we can to be in there with those people. So there's a big ride. It's called Ragbri. It's really unique, but it's 7 days across Iowa, and there's set stop towns. And last year we had a team of about 225 people, and they were all just linked. They registered to be a part of the team. They didn't have to pay to do it. It was really just an affiliation, like you might do when you're running your local 10K with your run club. And but what it was is that I think it showed customers that we are doing, it reinforced with customers, we're doing the thing you do. We are part of this. And so the stories that we got were just riding next to people. And we had a range of stories. We had people there was a family, a lovely husband and wife, who they hadn't gone on a vacation in 22 years because their special needs daughter, nonverbal special needs daughter, had just passed away. And so 22 years of their life was them staying local and being caretakers. Now they would go on little rides, and their other kids would watch their daughter, but they didn't get a chance to take a trip. They decided to take a trip and do the thing that we were doing, this Ragbri ride. So we got a chance to ride alongside with them and hear that story as we're riding bikes across Iowa on an 80-mile ride. And other people are sharing their stories and being there. And so we are able to then take that material and put it out there. And I think what that does is, for us, it just shows that we are part of the life that our customers are leading in a real way. We're not doing it just as a act of performance. When you're looking at a 100-mile day to ride, you got to ride 100 miles, and I know that there's a lot of people who listen, or a lot of people who've been on the show. It's being there and being part of it is a big thing. And with where we are in marketing and communication right now, you can't be performative and just talk about the lifestyle of the brand. You have to be able to go out there and be a part of it and take part and really be a member of it.
Yeah, that's great. I love what you said. You've got to ride 100 miles. You actually got to go on that journey. Nothing is worse than that kind of fake thing of like, okay, I'm along with you on this. I think that ties really great into your final lesson, actually, where you said you are not alone. And I know you think you're maybe talking about something slightly different here, but it's kind of all along the same idea of being there with your customers and being there with the community. You said you learned this from Anika Leidenberg. She's a muralist and co-founder of You Are Not Alone Murals. So how did you learn this from Anika?
Yeah, so it's Annika. Sorry that
Annika, yes. Yes, that's true.
So Annika and her partner Melissa Schultz started this program called You Are Not Alone Murals, and it's very simple. They work with world-renowned muralists, and they put up murals around New York and around the world, and they also do it digitally, and all it says is You Are Not Alone, and it's rendered in these beautiful ways because they're working with these famous artists, and these artists are giving of their time and energy. And the goal with that is so that it's to destigmatize the conversation around mental health, to let people in a time of need know that they are not alone. And so there's an act of surprise. You may be frustrated and heading into work on a given day, but then you pass this mural, it says you are not alone. And I guarantee if you see it, you're going to feel something different. I think it's also a great reminder that if you aren't in one of those situations, there surely is someone in your life who is. So it reminds you to be cognizant that could be happening around you, and to maybe take the time to call a friend, text a friend, and just make sure that you're understanding the situations that other people are in. So working with them, the relevant message from that was definitely one about what this program is. And the fact that we got to be a part of it is a huge gift. But I think when I look at it from a leadership perspective, it's also that if times are changing, with marketing, or there's new things to do, or you're not really sure where to go with a project, and, you could be a marketing leader, you could be just somebody, you're 2 years in and new. And the reality is that you're not alone. If you're trying to learn something, you're trying to figure something out, the opportunity to ask somebody for help in your role is right in front of you. And, the other thing I've learned from a good friend and coworker, his name is Trevor King, anybody will help you with anything as long as you tell them exactly what you need. So I say that to people all the time. Hey, I'm not really sure where to go with this campaign. Well, talk to somebody who's done it before. Ask them what they learned. I'm trying to find if there's an out-of-house creative partner I should use. Well, find a brand that, find a colleague who's maybe had to deal with that before. Ask them, but tell them specifically what you're looking for. And everybody is willing to help, especially when you look at the world of creative and marketing. I mean, you're looking at a lot of creative folks who have had to figure stuff out in their lives, or they're trying to take a different path, or, maybe they want to be more creative and they don't get a chance to. And so these are people who are willing to help. They want to collaborate. They want to work with you. So not being afraid just to ask people, and reminding yourself that you're not alone, and asking for help specifically. Don't make people solve your problems. That's a waste of time. But asking people for help about something where you really think they can be of assistance is something that's really important to do.
Yeah, you ever hear that? There's famous Harvard Business Review story about the monkey. Everyone's got a monkey on their back. Don't give someone else your monkey. But I love what you say, you are not alone. That is kind of one of the points of the How I Made It in Marketing podcast, right? You can see some of these big marketing leaders. You can see videos of Connor out there and all the cool things he's doing with Priority Bicycles, and be like, yeah, whoa, it must come easy to him, right? But hopefully he's here. He shares, hey, this is what's worked. This is what didn't. This is what I learned. But finally, I want to ask you, I love looking at people's backgrounds. Very few people actually start in marketing. They do many other things. I know you had a background in the agency business we talked about, but before that, you were a Division I athlete. So I wonder what you learned from that really helped with your marketing. Because when I think of You Are Not Alone, I mean, sports, obviously they're team sports. We are not alone. We're together on a team. I think maybe we're a little unique in that you did track and field. You were a pole vaulter. So it's almost like a combination of, you have to be an individual contributor like we need to do in marketing and CMO, yet you're on a bigger team. So was there anything you learned about You Are Not Alone, about marketing, about running a business from being a Division I athlete?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being a Division I athlete in college was a great experience, because it teaches you that you got to show up and work every day. And there is a certain amount of a workout that has to get done on a given day that is completely outside of your control. And it's going to be awful. And it's going to hurt 100% of the time that you do it. Every single time you go out on a given day for a workout as an athlete, you will be pushed to your limit. And I think that adds a certain level of resilience to it. And I think as I've gotten older in time, I can't expect that same level of resilience or desire from everyone on the team. But I do think the thing that does carry forward is the fact that, teams are organisms. They have different personalities, but a shared goal. So I think there's a lot of aspects of how can I give people the vision for success? How can we share in that? How can we work on that together? How can we understand that people are different and will contribute in different ways? And if they're contributing differently, it doesn't mean that they're not contributing correctly. So I think all of that is great, but I do think too that the fact that just things are hard and things take work and that it's okay to be uncomfortable, those are all things that even though I'm 20 years removed from wearing short shorts and spikes, I still carry that with me. And I do try to take it as a point of pride of being able to work hard, figure stuff out, and in some respects, win in terms of being able to accomplish goals.
Yeah, and hey, maybe you could use your past experience to do a mashup like bike pole vaulting. It could be like Red Bull Flug Tag. There you go. Oh man, there's a bad idea for you.
There's a great pole vaulter now who's just crushing world records, and I can't even imagine the thought of doing it. I can't believe I ever did it. When I look at photos, it's like it was a different person.
Yeah, different life. All right. Well, thank you for telling all these stories from throughout your career. If you had to break it down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Yeah, I think that the key qualities are the key quality for a marketer is resilience. I think it's being able to be flexible. Projects change, times change, work ethics change, team skills change, technologies change. Like things are going to change. And anyone who's listening to this, you're listening because you are trying to find a way to get ahead of the roles and the opportunities that you have in front of you. And you know how quickly things change. So I think resilience and not being stuck with what worked before, we're going to do it again is really the most important thing. Once you understand that, I think you can scale how you work to your personality and what parts that you like about your job or parts you want somebody else to do. But really being resilient as a marketer is key.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all these lessons from your career, Connor, showing us that we are not alone. Thanks for all this today.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I hope it's helpful.
Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.